So yeah, welcome to today's webinar. We have Asif Muhammad with us today, who owns and runs Main Course Associates, a boutique accounting and operations consultancy for restaurants and the hospitality sector. So for those who don't know, this is actually a follow-up session to the first one he ran for us at the beginning of lockdown, which I know our members found really, really useful. In that session, he ran through all the various government funding schemes available and gave some advice on ways we can adapt our business strategy, financial planning to really manage that cash flow during the height of COVID back in April. But thankfully, today we meet again, now under very different and more positive circumstances. As lockdown begins to ease and the 4th of July reopening date announced, there's really no better time to have Asif back to help us get our ducks in a row, get back into gear so we can kickstart our businesses again profitably and safely. So highlights from today, we can expect Asif to be sharing some really interesting data him and his team have been gathering from their work internationally and in the UK. And then he'll be walking us through some operational, financial, and communications considerations when reopening. This will really help us make as much impact as possible to boost income and future-proof our businesses. Finally, this session will end like all our other webinars with a Q&A. So please feel free to send through your questions to Asif via the chat function. Finally, to ensure the session runs smoothly, please make sure your cameras and mics are disabled throughout the webinar. And don't worry, we'll be recording today's session and I will be sharing it alongside his presentation deck in a follow-up email to everybody. And I'll also include the link to his first webinar with us so that you can refer back to it and share with your teams. So Asif, I'll hand it over to you.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us wherever you happen to be, whether that's in your gardens or offices or home. I have relatively limited time with you today. So part of what we aim to cover with you is the finance and overall strategy for the reopening, which is almost like a relaunch after quite an elongated period of closure. So the topics that we're looking to cover, and by the way, I think the introduction has already been made, but just to cover, I run Main Course Associates. We have offices in London, Spain, Italy. We're soon to be opening in Netherlands. We do some work in Hong Kong and also in Miami in America. So as a result, we do have quite a well-rounded view of the overall position in the sector. And some of these other countries are a bit ahead of us, so we have been able to learn some of those things from them, which is very useful for our clients and you guys in the UK. So the things that I'm aiming to cover with you today are going to be around trust issues, which is mainly around rebuilding customer confidence. It's fabulous that we can now open on the 4th of July, but if the customers don't turn up, then that's going to be a problem. So there's going to be a jointed effort between the government, really, by them changing their messaging, and also us to try and rebuild that customer confidence so that people do turn up. And then we'll look at the communication strategy. A lot of that will be around the trust building, but also some of it will go beyond COVID. We will look at the overall strategy and the game plan that you're working on and should be working on. Finance, which is a very key part. Cash, we've always said, has been the king. It is the king, and it will probably continue to be the king for the foreseeable future. So we need to be thinking about that. And then we'll also cover a bit of time, spend a bit of time covering the planning for the future part, which is what happens with life beyond COVID, because there will be life beyond COVID, although in times like this, it doesn't appear to be. At the end, we'll have a Q&A session, so feel free to pop your questions as they come to you in the chat box, and then at the end, we will cover those for you. Just before I start, I wanted to highlight a position to you that Main Course, our firm, we believe that these are challenging times. I mean, we don't have to believe it. We can see that these are challenging times. But our approach to our sector, hospitality and restaurant, remains bullish in the long run. Although prudent in the interim, and I think that's the right word. So you don't want to go back in your shell, but you do need to be thinking, what's the right level of prudence here, whereby we can push on a bit but hold back a bit, and then as we get out of this, we can really go on a bullish run. So let's get straight into the deck. We're going to talk about the trust issues to begin with, which is around rebuilding the consumer confidence. And before I get into the detail of it, let's look at some of the stats, which I'm sure you guys have all been hearing from the media. There's been all sorts of WhatsApp groups that have been running concurrently, and there's been some scary stuff in it, some good stuff in it, and all that sort of stuff. So let's pause here and take a rounded view. Since the lockdown happened, around 75% of the operators completely stopped trading. So that's a very scary number, which just goes to show that the sector completely almost came to a standstill. Nearly 80% of the operators are now planning for a phased opening, and we'll cover that phased reopening in a moment, because I think that is quite a key part, that we want to be opening, but we need to be planning for a phased opening as opposed to opening all the sites in our portfolio. Unfortunately, though, we find that 13% of owners are still waiting for info. Now, this stat was correct until yesterday. I think since that the government guideline has been published, it's likely that it's changed a bit, but it remains valid. What's quite nice to see are the last two, which is that 40% of the leaders in our sector think that within a week or so of the opening, we will start to see some decent inflow. Now, we have some further data on that, so we'll cover it, and I think you'll see what I mean by that. But in my opinion, that's a very good stat to know. And then also, nearly half of the GB adults are quite keen to start dining out regularly. 35% of the overall GB adults are pledging that they will dine out more, and around 62% feel that they would be more comfortable if social distancing measures were implemented. So I think we can take a lot of heart from it, even though there's a lot of quote unquote scaremongering around. Now let's take a look at the graphic on the left-hand side. This is the data whereby certain customers have been asked, how would you feel, and what are your key considerations when you go in to rebuild that confidence, so that you can feel safe when you come and eat. So 64% people suggest that they would like to see some distance between the tables. We're very pleased, by the way, that the government said 1 meter plus as opposed to an enforced 2 meter rule, because 1 meter simply would mean that the capacity can increase more than 33%, which is nice. Around 60% of the people would want free hand sanitizers available. I think this is going to be quite a key part, and again, we'll cover that in a bit more detail. But our view is that I think you should probably be having hand sanitizers, and you don't have to have those tacky bottles and stuff. You can make them look quite nice on the tables, also in the bathrooms and stuff, and even at the entrance. Enhanced security protocols, about 56%. So I think you can see there's a common thread here, that nearly more than half the people who said that they are keen to start dining out regularly would also like to see these measures. So enhanced cleaning protocols will also include some of your sanitizing procedures, but also the PPE for your staff. Social distancing measures 55%, and enhanced food and safety hygiene protocols around 44%. I think, as I mentioned earlier, we can take fair bit of heart from these stats. Looking further, so July 4th has been now confirmed for us, which is great. Notice the next line here. Ethical, charitable, community-based and environmental initiatives are also of interest, but the top focus for everybody remains on safety and hygiene. So the reason that we're putting a lot of emphasis on this is that not only you need to do these things, you have to communicate them to the consumers, because if you don't, they're not going to know, and therefore they may not end up choosing you to come and dine at your place. So we need to do these things, and we need to communicate them in order to rebuild that confidence. So You can see the next line, building confidence around safety measures demonstrates to the consumer that you are responsible and caring organization that they can trust, and therefore they can feel safer. Many more consumers would be comfortable to return if added precautions were implemented, but also communicated. So this is the point that I was making earlier. And I think the last point here is that whilst we can put these measures, we can communicate them, I think where possible, we should also be thinking about evidencing them. So one of the things that we've been telling all clients is that get your hygiene and safety checks done, come up with that strategy, communicate it to the people, and then ideally, if you can have it certified, put it up on your website. Be able to communicate. Now, you don't have to put it on the website, but you certainly need to be able to evidence it. But we would suggest that actually, if you can have a section on your website where you can say, actually, we're going to put it up so everybody can see. And that not only takes care of your duty of care to your customers, but also the new regulations and the laws that are coming through to say, actually, you should be taking care of this. Moving on to the communication. So there's going to be a little bit of overlap with what we've covered just now, but let's start with the top. Showcase your true value and show consumers the measures you've put in place. This is around the safety that we talked about, plus the richness of experience that you offer that they cannot recreate at home. That will be very important. So this goes back to when I mentioned earlier that there is going to be life beyond COVID. So we need to be thinking about that too. So it's not just that people can come and feel safe at your place. Of course, they need to do that. But why would they come to you? This is the richness of experience that you offer, which is what simply that they cannot recreate at home, even though they may have been in the past ordering meals from you through Deliveroo or whatever else. But, you know, going to the restaurant is simply a different experience. So update your customers on your plan to reopen, social, digital newsletters. We find newsletters are very important because actually, whilst you can put up a post and stuff on social, if you go, you know, too many lines, people stop reading. A newsletter feels like quite a personal message from you, the owner, the chef, the managers, the team. So we've suggested to our clients to be thinking of at least 3, possibly 4 newsletters until the opening and continue to insist on your message. Focus on engaging with your customers and deliver positive messaging aligned to their concerns. So I think we've touched that safety is one concern and hygiene and so on, but also why should they come to you, which is the richness of your offer. A more rounded view of your business is going to resonate better. Your story, your brand, what you stand for, and what makes you special. So here, what would suggest is that you should, in the last 15 weeks of rhetoric, all around the COVID, the problems, the issues, that doesn't help. And actually, sometimes it's quite easy to forget why we're in this business and why we opened the restaurant in the first place. So if you go back to that place, which is what led you to open and to serve your customers, I think that will help you re-engage with your customers with the right story, with the right brand. As I said, despite COVID, because there is going to be life beyond it. So just to recap then, remember to also focus on hygiene matters. It's no good just having them. You have to communicate these two. Get the message across that we are open and that customers will be eating and drinking in a safe environment. So just a couple more tips on this in terms of communication. We have to communicate relentlessly about you and your safety measures. We have to simplify and be direct. We ought to be listening and encouraging input and adapt. So I think this is going to be quite important. Nobody has had this experience before. I think you need to be asking your customers, how do they feel? What would they like to change when they come to dine at your place? And then you can adapt quite quickly because the danger is that this has never happened before. We look at the government guidelines, the people come and we focus too much on these hygiene matters, and all of a sudden the restaurant starts smelling of a sanitized hospital ward. That's not going to be very pleasant, really. So we need to be thinking about those things, and of course illustrate through stories and affirm with actions. I just wanted to cover that the consumers between 18 to 34 years of age are also interested, despite all the other things. They still want to know the source, where the food is sourced from, what are the social and ethical issues, the carbon footprint, as we know that this generation has been quite keen on that, waste management, and how businesses are looking after their people. Regular communication on these topics will build confidence, trust, and loyalty. Engage with your team and come up with creative ideas. We will cover the engagement with the team part a little later on, but for communication, this is important that you actually ask their point of view as well. But just notice the last point here. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And this is why I'm stressing quite a lot that you need to be really, really thinking about your communication strategy properly. Don't just put up a couple of messages up and 1 or 2 newsletters and say, well, this is it, job done, because we've communicated. Actually, we need to continue to send the message in a way that people don't feel bombarded, but the message has to be delivered. So just to read that again, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Right, let's move on to strategy. This is around developing the right game plan. And so our focus here to our clients and actually friends and everybody and just industry at large is plan for a 12-week strategy for now. But you need to remain open to change, because in 2 weeks of opening, things may change. And if they do, then you want to be able to adapt very, very quickly. But don't just have a strategy of 1 or 2 weeks. I think have a common denominator of 12 weeks, and then you can flex things as and when they come. And as you pick up the messages, as you see what needs fixing or adjusting or changing, so you could do so. So let's run through the top here. 63% of British customers claim that their biggest lifestyle change will be to actively support local businesses much more than ever. This is very encouraging, I think, for our sector, particularly for those neighborhood restaurants that generally have always had a bit of a disadvantage. Consumers seem, and this was actually very interesting for us when we came across it. Consumers seem to be less interested in deals and offers and promotions than before lockdown. This is likely because consumers' biggest concern is the failure and struggles of the local businesses. So they really want to support us at the moment. And I think all of this current rhetoric and messaging has made people just rethink about the local business and about the community feel. And so the next message leads on to that. So you don't just have to be a local business to build a community. You could be in the middle of West End and still be able to build your community. So think outside the box, but remain relevant. Plan for a rephased opening. As I mentioned earlier, if you have 5, 10, 15, 20, 100 sites, whatever, I think you should be thinking about phasing the opening. Almost all of our portfolio, wherever we have multiple sites, this is the advice we've given. This is the plan that we've put in place. We open maybe 2 or 3 in the first week, and then another 2 or 3 the week after, and then perhaps another 2 or 3 the week after. And as a result, not only we can see the phasing of it, and we can learn what we need to learn and implement those points at the next sites, it will also mean that your financial plan, which we're going to cover in a moment, will also stick quite nicely. Meaning that you don't have to unfurlough everybody from day one, and you can just sort of see how things are planning out. Also, don't forget to plan for operational challenges and the renegotiation of supply contracts. Now, how do you plan for the restaurant that you're looking at? What are the things that we ought to be thinking? So we need to plan our space, front of house, back of house, and outside. Don't forget that, even if you don't have the outside license, I think you should talk to your council. The councils are actually quite open to looking at that at the moment. But I would almost argue that you could get probably 6 to 8 covers outside, and that's going to help you, even if you don't have a pavement license. But if you do, then make use of it as much as you can. Once you have planned and got this floor plan in order, then you need to put a nice financial plan in action. Don't do it in reverse. We have seen that some people have been trying to put a financial plan and then plan their space. I think you need to see what can you do comfortably where people feel safe, and based on that, work out your business, your financial plan, and then you can focus on the cash inflow that will come from it. Introduce short and long-term changes. Focus more on the short term in this new normal, but do not invest too heavily in COVID measures. And One of the reasons is that even though there's this talk that the new norm is forever changed and all of this sort of stuff, life is going to carry on. And in 3 to 6 months' time, maybe 9 months' time, we will be in a new, in the normal that we used to know. Now, it may have a few changes to it, but it's not going to have permanently changes. So, for instance, I don't think we're ever going to get comfortable always being served by a waiter wearing a mask. I don't think we're ever going to get very comfortable by having these huge, perfect screens in the middle. That just takes away from the essence. So, our advice is that you should certainly think about the measures, but do not put too much cash that currently you may not even have in tackling with the COVID measures. We need to be very clever, thinking outside the box, put those things in place, but don't invest too heavily. Consider touch-free technology. So at my firm, Main Course Associates, we've developed a QR solution. I think a lot of other operators have too. So have a look on mcaQRsolutions.com. This is a touch-free technology whereby we can simply get your menu done in a QR format, and you could either put them simply on your tables, or you could have them engrossed in very nice crystal or wood or whatever you may like. People can simply take out their smartphones and get the whole menu on the phone and be able to communicate with the waiter. So I think touch-free is quite handy. I think menus have always been a problem. So this would be quite a useful solution there. I think some people had been doing deliveries. If you haven't been doing it, I think you might want to consider. You may even want to consider doing your own delivery service. This is something that we advocate quite strongly with our clients. That whilst Uber Eats and Deliveroo and Just Eat and so on, they have their own place. I think it doesn't take away from the fact that you could be doing your own delivery service. Your staff who are frankly a bit bored now and they really want to be taking part in the business, you could bring them out of furlough on a part-time basis, particularly now that part-time furlough will be available from 1st of July. Get them on Boris bikes or their own bikes, and they could cover a radius of within 1 to 2 kilometers or 1 to 2 miles quite easily. And therefore you can save on that 30-35% commission that we've been paying to the operators, especially if you're going to have a manager or somebody on site. You could be promoting your own delivery. So please do consider that. Look out for your team for re-engagement and possibly even retraining. So in the first slide, we noticed that nearly 75% restaurants had shut down. Some of them probably didn't even keep in touch with their teams on a regular basis. And so therefore the re-engagement, we still have about 10 odd days before we open. I think we need to now start to get back in that rhythm where the team starts to feel as a team again. We have started to ask that you maybe start to have some team meetings on site. Obviously still remain socially distant when you come in, but you can start to sit down and work with them. So just start to re-engage. And have you thought about the PPE for your staff? If you haven't, you may want to think about it. Start taking advanced booking. So on Tuesday, when the announcement came, we had a lot of our clients. We were anticipating this measure to be introduced. A lot of our clients had already their mailers ready, and I think around 2:30 p.m. the mailers went out, and about 30% of our portfolio, we noticed, was booked for the first 3 days by the end of that day. That gave us a lot of heart, and I think it also reaffirmed the point that actually if you open and if you make people feel safe, I think they will start to do so. So advanced bookings is actually quite nice. It will really give you a lot of heart at the moment. Last point is consider straight up drinking license. So if you don't have an alcohol license whereby people can come and drink there sort of straight up without you having to serve food, I think you might want to consider, because we have heard since Tuesday that the councils have opened about this and they will consider talking to you. If you could do it directly. If you have a licensing lawyer, then perhaps maybe even better that you work through them. Actually, this could bring quite a nice point, because pubs are going to struggle to meet all the demands that they could in this lovely weather because of the social distancing and so on. But you may want to consider the straight up license. Let's move on to the finance part. So, here the key message from us is that cash was king, it is king, and it will remain king for a very, very long time. So how do we ensure that we're keeping a close eye on our cash flow and we're generating more? So if you haven't already listened to or watched the webinar that we did with Code back in April around finance and cash and the schemes that were available and the loans and stuff, you may want to watch that, because we give you some good insights about the schemes that have been available. So the message here is that the planning your reopening is going to be very important, because if you open with the wrong opening strategy, it may end up costing you more than when you were closed. So we need to really be thinking about this, minimizing your costs and help to maintain an operational balance in your business. In this initial tricky phase is the challenge. So hence we were saying that you need to plan for the 12 weeks. So you can see that the first couple of weeks may look like this in the curve, but then it will grow back up. So plan it like that, so you can see what costs are going to be there. Certainly the unfurloughing of some of the staff is going to be there, and so how do we manage that is something that we'll have to think about. Make sure you get fully clued up on what funding schemes are available, how to access them, as well as pros and cons for some of those, and manage your cash flow as closely as you look at your profit. So let's take a look at the detail of this. We need to be stretching, that's the key part here, stretch the amount of cash that you have available, whether the cash, that was the cash from your previous cash flows, whether that's because of your loans and so on that you have managed to arrange. We need to be stretching it and think about preserving. So suppliers are quite a key part, because without them we will not be able to operate properly. So you need to ideally you would work out drip feeding them with payments, perhaps work out a regular percentage that you could pay them so they feel that something's coming through. What we've been able to agree with some of our vendors, given that when the lockdown happened we had to stop paying, unfortunately, is that we pay you a percentage chunk for any previous debt that we owe you, and moving forward we could pay you on a 7-week account or a 7-day or a 14-day account. And actually a lot of them have been very receptive to it, so we think that's a good strategy to think about. But really it's all about communicating with them, so you can find that happy medium where they don't feel that they get left out. Our common denominator with all of this was that we never wanted to be, and we do not want to be, a reason, whether that's our restaurant clients or us, we do not want to be a reason why somebody goes out of business. So by completely holding it too much isn't quite right. So we've been trying to find that happy medium. So ask lender for your payment holidays. The lenders are still offering those holidays. So if you couldn't get them earlier for whatever reason, I think if you talk with your lender now, you will find that they will still talk with you and they will allow you. We've recently secured payment holidays until December, actually, which just gives us that nice breathing space whilst we just get back on our feet. Hold on to the rents. Now, rents have been a very important, very interesting topic. Landlords have been playing tough, tenants have been playing tough, and all that sort of stuff. Our strategy here has been that you just need to be communicating. So sit down, talk with them. They may be a bit tough, while you can be a bit tough. The whole point is to find that happy medium in the middle. So even if you have to pay and they don't allow you to have rent-free period, agree a 2 to 3 year payment plan with them that will just give you a long time. And we've successfully done that for a lot of our clients. And if you need any help for that, you're very welcome to talk to us about this. Think about your balance sheet. So this was a topic that has crept up a few times, where people have asked that actually, why don't we use this opportunity to clean up our balance sheet? What you certainly want to, if you can, you may want to talk with your FD or CFO or your accountants and see what options are available. The last couple of points are actually where we really feel you need, if you invest some money into this, I think you'll find that the returns over time are going to be amazing. So get a proper FD, a finance director or a CFO in place to help you navigate through these tricky times. We wrote an article which is on LinkedIn, and actually when we share this deck with you, you can click on the link. You'll be able to see about how FDs and CFOs can help revive businesses. I think earlier I mentioned that the biggest illusion in communication is the biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And what ends up happening sometimes is that the MD or the ops team and the FD or the finance team end up working in their own little silos, and everybody thinks that they know what's happening and stuff. Sometimes that's not the case. So actually, if you sit down and work very closely with your finance director, and if you haven't got one, you should think about bringing somebody on. Really work with them to sit down and understand what really needs to happen. How much cash do we have available? Realistically speaking, how can that be stretched? What other schemes are available to increase that, and so on? Very important, please. I cannot stress enough to work with your CFO and finance director. Just a recap of some of the funding that's available still. The £51,000 limit on a rateable value limit on the grants was very disappointing, certainly for the hospitality and especially for our London restaurants, because very, very few people were able to get that. Although we noticed and we understand that the government has set up a further discretionary fund. It's a very small fund. I think they've only given about 5% of the overall funding to the in each council. You will need to speak to your relevant councils. I think, unfortunately, Westminster and some of these will not. The rateable values are simply outrageous, so I don't think, unfortunately, that will work. But if you were on the borders of zones 2 and 3, you may still find that by applying for it, you may be able to get that £25,000. We had a client in Fulham that we were able to successfully get it, and their rateable value was over 51. So that was useful. Quick recap of furlough scheme. Thankfully, it's now been extended. So in the previous webinar that we did, I think at the time it was only extended until June. It's now running until October. But I think the real key part for us is that the flexible furlough is now available from 1st of July, which basically means that we can really plan our opening strategy, whereby we can bring some people, we can do the floor plan, we can then build a financial plan out of it and see what do we need to do. And therefore, you'll be able to bring people out of the furlough. So employees can come back part-time. When they are working, we will be paying 100% of those for those hours, and the rest can continue to be claimed from the furlough on the basis that was that those people were put on furlough. So if, for instance, somebody was earning £1,000 a month on furlough, and now you want them to work 30 or 40% of the time, you will pay for full 30 to 40% of the time, and the rest of the money we can continue to claim from furlough. From August, we will have to, so far the government's been paying the ERS national insurance contributions and ERS pension as well. That's employers' pension and employers' national insurance. From August, it falls on us. From September, we'll be contributing 10% of the pay plus ERS, NI and pensions. And from October, the employers will also contribute 20% as opposed to just 10. So coming back to the point around planning your cash flow, putting arrangements in place for crown debt and PAYE, for PAYE and unpaid VAT. HMRC has been something that a lot of hospitality businesses certainly have put right at the back burner, and perhaps rightly so, because we needed to be in that position to remain standing to live to fight another day. But what's not okay is, as we start to open, to continue to just forget about this. I think we will need to start planning. I think we should look at what PAYE debt there is available. The government's help time to pay arrangement is available. I think we should look at that. Consider a long payment plan, maybe 9 to 12 month payment plan, but do consider it. Don't just leave it, because come December, January, February, it will catch up with you, and it will be then too much of an amount to deal with. Similarly, unpaid VAT, the VAT was deferred until next year, but again, if you start and your start is good and is quite successful and you have the ability to, then you should consider making an arrangement to start to pay it on account. In terms of C-bills and B-bills loans, hopefully you guys were able to get those in place. If you haven't, the schemes are still operating. We understood that they may be running until September, but I think September, October, November probably is the period that they will continue operating. If you haven't done so, it's a good time to go back. And now that you have better knowledge, you could do so. If you did CBILS in before, and there was a bit of a misunderstanding about this, if you did CBILS before, that you can't go back. Actually, no, you can go back, and because things have changed at the time in February, March, April. When you did your cash flows, you didn't know when we were going to open. A lot of people planned that they may be opening from June, and that hasn't happened. So you are able to go back and talk to the banks for a top up, and they will consider it. You'll still need to prove the whole model and all the rest of it, but do have a think about that. And B-bills, I think, just to summarize, because we couldn't cover them in the previous time because they weren't available at the time, is that you can get £50,000 or 25% of your turnover, whichever is the lower amount. The government backs it 100%, and you repay it over 6 years, with the first 12 months interest-free and repayments-free. So I think that nicely summarizes our plan for cash flow and finance. I'll spend a couple of moments just talking about the future, because it is very important not to forget this. So we have to start thinking about future-proofing our business. We need to start thinking about revisiting our business plan with whatever's happened. I think overall, what we found was some of our clients that always wanted growth, and growth was part of their strategy. This is now actually one of the best times that you could expand if this is still part of your strategy, and if you feel that your financial position is good. A couple of reasons for that, pretty obviously, is that there's a lot of stock available on the market now, and rents have actually been chopped. We were in the middle of quite a few deals, and we've been successfully able to renegotiate on premiums, in fact, or completely get rid of premiums, and also been able to reduce the rent quite significantly on the deals that were in the process. So what we're finding is that there's a lot of stock, and obviously nobody wants to have their premises sitting empty. It's a good time to do so. You can always build in the COVID clause or an unforeseeable delay clause, and you'll find that a lot of landlords and lawyers are very open to those, whereby you could find a site, you could exchange, and then put in that clause with a delay for completion, possibly to December or even January, or until such point that you feel safe. So it's a good time to be thinking about that. Certainly listen to your customers, look at the loyalty incentives that you may want to do. And the next point is around doubling down on your marketing. Marketing is an expense that we find a lot of FDs and a lot of finance people generally just say, chop this is the first thing to go. Actually, in times like this, we feel that you should be doubling down on your marketing and on your messaging. Update your brand concept, rethink your menus, and right-size the overheads. Because sometimes, we had, some of the people were just frankly carrying mad overhead. So this is a good time to be overall thinking about this too, because I'm repeating myself, but just to cover again, there will be life beyond COVID. And so we need to be thinking about all of these things. In terms of the brand pack, rethinking the menus, right-sizing the overheads, revisit the business plan. Consider is the time to raise some equity as well. Don't just consider too much on debt, because the debt, whilst is useful, over-leveraging is never really a good thing. What things and what changes do you need to do to your business to keep going through thick and thin? Will all be the things that should really be thought through in terms of future-proofing your business and to build a resilience plan. Here's a quick summary of everything. I think when we send this deck to you, you'll be able to sort of run through it all. We just thought that all the bullet points with everything that we covered in terms of trust, communication, reopening strategy, business strategy, and cash flow and finance, all the bullets are here for you that you'll be able to look through. I just wanted to leave you with a couple of quotes before we move on to the Q&A. The Brad Carter said that there's always money to be made in chaos. And George Bernard Shaw, one of my favorite quotes, people who say it cannot be done should not interrupt those who are actually doing it. And I think we want to be one of those that are actually doing it at the time. As I said earlier, there's a lot of negative talk on a lot of WhatsApp groups, on a lot of every time we turn on the TV, there's this talk of chaos and how everything's doom and gloom. Actually, it's not. I've mentioned to you earlier, our clients send out mailers and so on, and actually a lot of them, within a space of a day or two, got the first week booked. And actually, that's just 2 days. So if you have the right strategy, if you remain on your messaging, I think we'll find that actually things are going to be okay. So be positive and just crack on, really, and be one of those who are actually doing it, rather as opposed to the ones that are saying that it cannot be done. Thank you very much. Let's take your questions. Okay, right. So in terms of questions, let's start. So we have some people saying C bills and B bills did not work for us. Can and should we still look for some other funding? Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think it can happen that the schemes simply didn't work because some of the banks, frankly, didn't know about how they should really have been operating the C-bill scheme. They picked up a X number of graduates and chucked them up and said, well, crack on. And unfortunately, these people just didn't know. They couldn't understand the ins and outs of hospitality businesses. So that was a problem. I think you should certainly be thinking about it. The what we call the commercial loans are still available. But as part of that, there are also a lot of commercial lenders available too. So your custodian bank, this is the bank that you generally work with, is not the only one that does C-bills or B-bills. There are a lot of other commercial lenders too. So you may want to look at market invoice, market finance, funding options, and there are some brokers, people like Swoop and Raven, that you may want to be thinking about. We don't know what trading will look like. Will banks be funny about it? I think we've covered that. So pavement dining, are the councils being receptive? Should I wait a week or two before opening and see what happens? Well, you could. I think this is part of the phasing strategy that I mentioned. But if you only have one restaurant, I think 2 weeks is an enough period for us to sort of plan and open. So I think you can go ahead. But by all means, if you want to see what happens for a week or two, you can wait and then open up. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But our advice to our clients is that you just crack on, really buckle up and get moving. Remember, we still have flexible furlough available. I think the only danger here is that the day you open, you may find that your negotiating position with your landlords may weaken ever so slightly. But I don't think it will matter a huge deal. So that's that. In terms of pavement dining, yes, councils are receptive. You could and should, by all means, be thinking about talking to them not only about the pavement dining but also about straight up drinking license. I think that would all be very very happy. Could you elaborate on the COVID clause? Sure. So in any new transaction that we're looking to do at the moment, you would talk to your finance director or the lawyers, and you can ask them to insert what's called a COVID clause. Or an unforeseeable delay. Don't just put COVID. I mean, I think COVID is the word to use, but there could be a different type of virus, and then they may say, well, actually, we didn't have a clause for this. So it's either COVID or an unforeseen delay, a lockdown imposed by the government or something like this. That's not in your control. The advantage of that is that should something happen, say we come to September and everything's looking on track, and there's a problem, in terms of a second spike or the government locks down for some other reason, you will not be held to account to complete the transaction, and the other party can't pull out. So you can delay it, and I think that's the purpose of having a COVID clause, which I think works rather nicely, because ideally we would find a good site, we'll negotiate on a good rent or no premium or X premium or whatever it may be, and rent-free period, and then we can exchange quickly. But leave the COVID clause in, and look to complete much further down the line. Any tips on working out the P&L projections in terms of reduced capacity. Yes, so the very first point here is to get your floor plan sorted. So you will look at your back office, back of house, front of house, and outside, and see how many covers you can comfortably and safely have, ensuring the government guidelines, of course. Once you've got that, you then need to see, okay, well, this is now my menu. Hopefully it'll be reduced over the first 2-3 weeks whilst you find your feet. How many, therefore, people in terms of back of house and front of house I need to bring on, and then you could work down. So the tip really is to get the floor plan and then work downwards, as opposed to saying, well, actually, we need to be taking £50,000. So what do we need to do about that? So that's the critical part there. Health and safety certification. Do we need certifications for COVID freeness or COVID measures? Is it a necessity? It's not a necessity insofar as having a certification, but the government's guidelines that have just been published are talking about sort of holding the employers or restaurant businesses to account if they don't, if they can't evidence all the measures and so on. So the ideal thing here to do would be to work with your health and safety experts that you've been working with before. And if you need some recommendations, you're very welcome to write to us. And we work with X number of colleagues and associates that we can recommend you. These people can come in, test your systems and measures that you're thinking about putting or have put in place, and then they could tell you that actually this is relatively safe. Now you can go ahead. Now you can go ahead and put up this health and safety on your website if you like. So I think you don't necessarily have to have a certification, but it will certainly be a good idea to get a professional in place, because none of us are COVID experts. So I think that would be a good idea. Hope that helps. Great. So I think that appears to be a wrap. I'll hand back over to Roxy.
Great. Hi guys, thanks. Thank you, Asif. That was very, very insightful. I think like the data about consumer confidence and that kind of thing it's very positive, which is great. I think a lot of food for thought for our members for planning to reopen again come July. So guys, I'll be editing this video today and circulating it alongside Asif's deck. And also his last webinar as well via email tomorrow. And it'll also be available on our website as well. So you can link to there for your staff in future as well. Cool. So thank you guys.
Excellent.
Thank you, Asif.
Thanks everyone.
All right, bye.